G'day, it's Dylan or DigiBrick Tips here today, and something I see people asking about like on a weekly basis is that they're having trouble bending any of these sorts of parts in Studio. Now a lot of these parts do have a built-in bend feature which can be absolutely perfect for whatever you're doing, but sometimes you really need them to bend in a certain way, or you're just having a little bit too much trouble like I quite often do, as we can see here, just getting it to bend exactly around the model or where you want it to go. This tutorial is going to go from Studio over to Mecabricks to Part Designer and then back to Studio. Fortunately, all of that software is free. Mecabricks, if you didn't know, is another digital Lego building program, but it runs through a browser. And look, Jason at Playwellbricks has done a really good tutorial on basically doing this same thing but using LDCAD. I just hate LDCAD, and I found this technique to be a little bit more user-friendly, so you know, you've got your options. Okay, so I wanted to add this part curving around the back and connecting to these modified closed clip things. And I knew I could do it because I had mocked it up with my own parts, as you can see here. But this part does not flex in Studio. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a version of this which is bent. Studio won't recognize it as part 14301. It'll be a new piece of geometry that you've created in Part Designer and exported into your custom palette. Okay, so we go over to mecabricks.com and it'll ask you to sign up, but I'm already signed in here. And this sort of landing page is like their forum and library where people show off the stuff that they've made, which is cool, but we want to go to the workshop, which is where the magic happens. The interface is pretty similar to Studio, but it just works a little bit different in some ways. For instance, instead of being able to click and drag a brick and, you know, let it click to where you want it to go, like in Studio, you have to define the side of the brick where you want the next one to go to, and then click it and it'll go to that side. So it's just a little bit of a different interface. So let's grab that hose that I wanted, hit enter after you've typed hose into the search thing. I am going to, on the filters, turn off decorated elements because that brings up a whole lot of stuff that I'm not looking for. And I can see the bit that I want, 14301 there. The magic flex tool is over here, this little S-curve. And now we're in the flex tool. Grab one of these dots at either end, and if we move that around, it's going to move to where it wants to go. But as you can see, you can obviously make it really short, like that. You can't do that in real life, or stretch it right out like it's an elastic band. You can't do that in real life. So I'm going to get rid of this, and I recommend going back to your model and just grab the bits that you know it's going to contact with. So it's going to connect to these bits at the top and bottom, and I'm just holding Control while I grab all of these at the same time. It's going to want to snake its way around these curved parts. Copy them, go New Studio, go Control N, New Studio, File, and paste that stuff in. Save this, just somewhere that you're going to remember. Hose guide. Back over to Mecabricks, we're going to go File, Import, and select LDraw. And so click File and find the file that you saved. Ta-da! Yep, that's perfect. I've got the bits where I want to connect my hose, and I've got the bits that are going to be the guide for bending the hose around. It was part 14301. So there she is. I actually undo that. I am going to click this connection point because that's where I want it to start. And then I'm going to click on the new part, and well, it's not going to be perfect. Oh, and by the way, to navigate around this interface, it's left click rotates. You can just use your mouse roller to zoom in and out, and the right button pans. I think there's a quick key for rotation and position, but I'm just going to use these two buttons at the top here. So the circle takes you to rotation, and I've got my sort of grid that I'm using. I'm going to set that to large to make sure that I'm snapping to 90 degrees. And then I'm going to put my increments back onto small so that I can get some fine tuning and jam that right in there. That's what she said, there's no time. So then I want to select the whole part So if it's red, it's selected. And then go back to my flex tool and grab this end. And I'm now going to use this view thing and go into a left-hand side view, so there's no risk that I'm like dragging it like far away from me or closer to the camera. Oh, actually, I probably want a front view if that's where it's placed. Yes. Good enough. So, I can drag this, and it's definitely only dragging on the two axes that I want. I think that's Y and Z. So I drag this end down to around about where it wants to go, then keep that end selected, and then go back to rotation. I'm turning it around, back to position, jam it in there, and then you've got your Bezier handles. And so if anyone's ever used Illustrator or any graphics package, you'll be familiar with Bezier handles, or even like graphing, like in statistics or whatever. You'll be familiar with Bezier handles for manipulating curves. And so that's got it to around about a symmetrical curve. But now we're going to grab, actually I want to jam that side in a little bit further. Now we're going to grab both ends, so holding Command, we click both of them, we've got both ends selected. Now over here, there is a divide button, and so that divides this span and puts an extra control point in the middle. So now we drag that down, and it's just a matter of, from this point, getting our control points, clicking them like you click, and then you drag the control gadgets, widgets. So now we've got that pretty close. I mean, it depends on how exact you want to be, but I think this is close enough. So once you're happy with how the curve is, you want to click out of the flexible tool part, and then get rid of all of your guide objects. And now export this. And we're going to export it as a wavefront.obj file. There is no studs, so I'm not going to put logo on studs. And it's going to create a 3D object out of that. So it's going to give me a little 3D object that I can now take into Part Designer, which, if you haven't got, is also from Bricklink. Okay, so now we're going to import a 3D object. Choose the file, and here it is. It's actually in my downloads. It was an untitled model, which I unzipped, and it's just called untitled.obj. You import that, and now there's some scale options here, and you might run into some issues here because the file might have come in at a funny size. We'll just go with the defaults. Insert. Yeah, that's come in a little bit too small. You can still scale this up with the scale tool. Just as long as you hold shift, it's not going to give you weird dimensions like this. Undo. This is sorry, I was just using the arrow keys to rotate. To make sure this is the right scale, I'm just going to go back to my project that I had here, and I'm going to do a very simple trick, which is grab a relatively long plate, clip it onto my connection points, and so now I know it's
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8
studs long. My connection point needs to be 8 studs apart. So back to Part Designer, holding shift and dragging this top corner, which gives you the most control, it seems. That's pretty close. Again, you can finesse this and get it perfectly right, but I'm pretty happy with that. So export to Studio. I'm just going to call this Tube Flexed, which is just the name so I remember what it is. Don't worry about putting anything for Bricklink item number, so we'll export that. And it has been added to Studio. Okay, thanks. So we now go to our custom brick parts in Studio. And of course you have to be logged in both Part Designer and Studio for these to appear. make sure there's nothing in our search field. And voila, tube flexed. There's a couple of practice ones I did there, but this is the one that we just made. And now another little gotcha, unfortunately, is that it won't have connection points unless you're very clever and you've figured out how to do that, which I'm sure you are, right? Far cleverer than me. But we're just going to do this by eye. And boom. Good enough for government. That part is grey. Copy and mirror. Turn it around, and that's what I was after. So you can do this with like almost any flexible part. Like you can see in my custom parts, this is a bit that I needed to manipulate for, I'll show you actually. This little guy here, which I was having trouble bending the hose for. And now, that fits. So thank you Studio and Mecabricks and Part Designer for being free software, and together having all the functionality to get our builds looking just perfect.